All right, so if you finished lecture 2, welcome back. This is Lessee lecture, and once again, you should have your lecture note out and open to example 3. Example 3. So we're going to start with no residual value. All right, and we're going to have the similar setup. We're going to have Cougar Construction and a 5-year non-cancelable lease with Larry's Leasing, rent payment $15,000 per year in advance. The lease transfers ownership, but has no bargain purchase option renewal features, and that's not unusual. If you're going to transfer ownership, why would you have a bargain purchase option or renewals? So that's pretty typical to have one feature and none of the others. Oh, excuse me, I didn't like that. Didn't like that little Control Z. All right. Okay. So it transfers ownership. Definitely going to be a capital lease. Incremental interest rate is 10%. Here's the fair value of the Bobcat. The residual value at the end of the lease is 0. So there's no residual value here. It's not that it's not guaranteed. There just is none. And the useful life is 7 years. And we're not going to go through the process of requalifying, although it's pretty simple. It tells us that it qualifies as a capital lease. Calculate the amount of lease equipment. So this equals, just to remind you, the present value of minimum lease payments. So it's an annuity due, 10%, 5 payments of $15,000 at $62,548. So here's the journal entry: leased equipment, lease payable, $62,548. But on day 1, we reduced the lease payable by a payment in advance of $15,000. Not every single lease that you're going to work with will have payments in advance. This one does. So it's not always the case that you have cash payment in advance. This is the capitalization. This is the capitalization. It's a big word, not a lot of room to write it. This is the actual capitalization, and this is a day 1 payment. All right, I tend to put these together when it is an annuity due. So just to remind you that if you're doing the interest calculation, you do have to remember that you're reducing the payable on day 1. So the adjusting entry for the interest expense is $47.55, and we did this calculation in example 1B, but we can do it again, $62,548, and it's minus the $15,000 times 10%. Okay. Now, here the depreciation expense. We're in a case 1 situation. Oh, look at that. I did it down there. So how nice was that of me to do that? It's 7 years. There's no residual value, so we don't have to think too much about it. But, oh, I'm sorry, we transfer ownership. So the useful life is 7 years, so we're in case 2. So this is case 2. That's not good. It's a little jumpy with the tables. All right. Case number 2. Depreciate as normal. That is over useful life, not lease term. Okay, that's because there's a transfer of ownership. So it transfers ownership. And when we have the payment, here's $15,000 credit. Here's the payable. The remainder goes to amortize the lease payable. Here's the interest payable, $47.55. The remainder goes to amortize the lease payable. All right? So that's no residual value. The tricky case is this example 4. So when you see a guaranteed residual value, what you're going to do is take the amount guaranteed and treat it like a lump sum at the end of the lease term. So let me show you. Usually we do timelines from left to right. The schedule is really a timeline from top to bottom here. Okay. So, and once again, I have two rows here for the same date. And the reason is I'm trying to emphasize that here's the amount capitalized. So the amount of leased equipment capitalized is $62,548, and technically it's the amount of lease liability capitalized. So if the question is, what's the amount capitalized in this lease? It's $62,548. If the question is, what's the lease liability balance at the end of the first day? It's $48,144. Okay. Your textbook will just have one row. These schedules are created based upon payment dates, which would include the guaranteed residual value. So up here it says payment and guaranteed residual value. So conceptually it's a little odd maybe to have a residual value in here. It's not strictly cash, right? If the item were worth $0 at the end, the lessee would have to pay $4,000 in cash. But let's say the item is worth more than $4,000. All they do is return it. So think of this residual value here when it's guaranteed. So that's I'm going to just say GRV. It's a return of value. All right. If Cougar Construction returns the Bobcat and it's worth $4,000, then the lessor will sell it and get $4,000 in cash. So we're going to treat it like cash, and the $62,548 discounts these flows, all these flows, at 10%. The present value of all these minimum lease payments here goes into this amount. So present value at 10% of all of those equals $62,548. Wow. This is a little temperamental. Okay. All right, so you present value the minimum lease payments, you get $62,548. You make your day one payment of $14,404. You have $48,144. Multiply that by 10%, and there's your first interest expense amount. All right. Now for the depreciation expense, this is case one. So this is a case one. So let me try to put some room here to work with. This is case number one. Item returned at end of lease. So we depreciate over the lease term, which is 5 years. So case number one, and I guess it's number one. Was it A or B? I think it's B. Let's go look. We're going up here. I hope you're not getting seasick. Yeah, B, case 1B. Guaranteed residual value. And case 1B. Subtract the guaranteed residual value. Okay. So at the end, at 12/31/11, you'll have accumulated depreciation of $62,548 less the $4,000, which is accumulated depreciation of $58,428. Okay. It seems kind of complicated. The easiest way I can explain it is when the residual value is guaranteed, you're promising, the lessee is promising that they will come up with that amount. So GAAP says it's included minimum lease payments. Put it in there, and then we just present value it. And when it comes to depreciating it, since we're going to return it, we don't use it up because it has future economic benefit. Okay, we expect it to return the item. It's going to be worth at least $4,000, and that will satisfy our guarantee. So conceptually a little tricky, but mathematically, just throw it in there like a cash flow. So interest expense to record the return of the Bobcat. Oh, so we're going to return the Bobcat, and we look at day one. Okay, so we're going to return this 4,000, and this entry, it's not going to be cash, but it's going to be a return of value. And interest expense is 361, and we have to remove a lease liability of 3639. So here's the interest expense, here's the lease liability, and here's the leased equipment. And I forgot to put something that should be comma net. And that means net of accumulated depreciation. So you could put leased equipment credit 62,548, and then accumulated depreciation 58,548. But we can also just put shorthand here, net of accumulated depreciation. Okay, so this indicates that the item, and let me go check the date, 12/31/11 to make this 12/31/11, that the item was worth 4,000 or more. Now the lessee doesn't get anything if it's worth more. The lessor has that benefit. So lessor benefits if the residual value is worth more. Now in this case, it's saying, hey, the item wasn't worth 3,000. So you still have the 361 and the 3639 and the 4,000 of leased equipment net. But, oh my gosh, what did I totally, what happened? Did it roll? That rolled over to the next page. That's kind of a pain in the neck. Let me get this thing squished up here somehow. Let's see if that fitted in. There we go. Okay, so here comes the guarantee, and this gets ugly because now the lessee has to pay 1,000. If they have to pay 1,000, we have to debit 1,000, and we're going to call it loss on cap lease. Okay, so that's all you do. If you have the item worth less, the realized residual value is less than the guarantee, then all you have to do is do the same journal entry as before, except credit cash for the amount due, and then debit loss on capital lease. So that's a return of an item with a guaranteed residual value. Okay, now example number 5. We're going to go back to unguaranteed residual value, and I'm going to put a break in the video here. So this one will stop, and you can go to the next one.